the story of the Bible is not new.
A classic clash of perspectives on the historical reliability of religious texts, particularly the Bible, and whether it should be regarded as mythological or historical. The student is raising the question of whether the Bible, like ancient mythologies, borrows from earlier traditions. They argue that stories of resurrection, like Jesus' death and resurrection, are part of broader mythological themes called predate Christianity.
It's been now, like, the Gospels, the story of the Gospels is not new. If you look at mythology, there's plenty, like more than enough, the stories that look just like Jesus. And, I mean, it's not folklore, it's mythology, and it's not like someone just came up and did that. It's just tradition and knowledge that has been passed down by many cultures, not just by some random group of guys. The 12 apostles, there's many other characters in mythology that have 12 apostles also. So it's not like the story of Jesus. It's not. I mean, that he had exactly 12 apostles, that 3 magicians follow him. It's not just random numbers. It's being passed down. It's knowledge. It's not just. The Bible is just a blend of cultures, a blend of traditions that have been passed down that finally consolidated in a book. That's what I believe. How do you account for those many stories that happened way before Jesus Christ?
All right, but sir, just listen to what you're saying. What I've heard you say is, because Jesus had 12 apostles, and because another religious teacher has had 12 followers.
Not just 12 followers, just death and resurrection, same, you know.
Right, good. Give me an example of someone who historically dies and historically rises from the dead. Give me another example other than Jesus.
Hercules, he went to Hades and brought back the dead and came from the world of the dead, just like Jesus went to hell and came back and resurrected. That's just like Jesus went to hell and came back.
Sir, Hercules is not an historical person.
It's a mythological one, that's what I said.
It's a mythological person.
Yes.
Hercules is not a human being who died and then rose from the dead.
How do you know that Jesus is a human being that died and rose from the dead? How did you differentiate Jesus from Hercules if your only source is the Bible? Just like Hercules, your sources are mythological texts.
Well, sir, what you're going to have to learn to do is you're going to have to look, and you better do it quickly because otherwise you will flunk literature courses. You're going to have to learn to tell the difference between mythology and historical narrative.
So the Bible is historical narrative?
Mark, Luke, absolutely.
Oh well, I don't know of any other historical book that talks about Jesus and that he died and resurrected aside from the Bible.
Well, then you need to read Antiquities by Josephus.
Can you tell me, Josephus? It's one. Tell me another.
Tacitus and Suetonius talk about followers of Christ.
Followers, not that he died and resurrected.
Oh yes.
They say that he died and resurrected.
The Jewish Mishnah has very hostile references to Jesus as being a false prophet. Very hostile references. So obviously Jesus was an historical person. He was not a mythological figure. Sir, if you can't tell the difference between mythology and historical narrative as literary genres, you will flunk your literature class.
I think you just flunk anthropology, sir, because it's the Bible it's categorized as mythological, just so you know.
Absolutely not.
Yes,
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are written with a literary style of historical narrative, meaning by that, at this time, in this place, with these people around, Jesus said this, he did that. It reads like the New York Times, the LA Times. It's reportage, eyewitness reportage. It's not once upon a time in the land of Nod, Wink and Blink and Nod took a boat ride. It's not once upon a time at all. It's at this time, in this place, during the rulership of Pontius Pilate, Tiberius Caesar, Herod. That's when it happened.
So, do you believe the Bible being a literal fact, just not a philosophical book, where wisdom is supposed to be learned of, and just just some random, well, not random, but like a historical book that you should read just like a textbook?
The Bible includes different literary styles. Obviously, the Psalms are poetry. Obviously, the book of Revelation is apocalyptic literature. Obviously, there's a lot of history, but when Jesus says, I'm the light of the world, it's not intellectually honest to say, oh, he's claiming to be a 100-watt light bulb. That's what it means to read the text literally.
Well,
no, you allow a writer and a speaker to use simile, metaphor, parable, allegory.
But that's what you're saying. You're saying that everything that's happened, like the 12 disciples can be just, how do you call it? Like an allegory for the 12 zodiac signs. I mean, you can't really just, like, what do you take for what is literal, and what is metaphor, and what's allegory? Do you know? Like, I mean,
You better learn how to distinguish metaphor from what is factual. You better. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to make it through a literature class. You've got to learn to distinguish historical narrative from mythology, legend, romance literature. If you read Homer's Iliad and Odyssey and walk away saying, that's historical narrative, you're making a humongous mistake.
Well,
obviously, Homer's Iliad and Odyssey are epic poetry.
That existed in history. They have, just like Jesus, they tell you a place, a time, and certain people that appear there. Why can't it be compared to the Bible?
Well, obviously.
Well, you say obviously, but it's not obviously.
Obviously, Muhammad was an historical person who really lived, taught, fought, and died. No question about it. Obviously, Siddhartha Gautama Buddha is not a myth. Siddhartha Gautama Buddha is a man who really lived. Obviously, the historical evidence is that Jesus Christ really lived. Obviously, the Holocaust really occurred. But General Eisenhower made sure that after the Allied victory of World War II, he had journalists come from Europe, from England, and the United States to record Dachau, Auschwitz, and Buchenwald.
Yeah.
Because he did not want the lie to be spread that, oh no, those death camps never existed. That was just an Allied plot in propaganda.
Just comparing the Holocaust to this,
That's not what we're talking about, sir. We're talking about historical literature. Nailing down, did this really happen or did it not happen? And I can promise you, sir, the overwhelming evidence is Muhammad was not a myth. Muhammad is not Oedipus.
I'm not talking about Muhammad, I'm talking about Jesus.
I know, and the overwhelming historical evidence is Jesus is not a myth. He really
what
lived.
is the historical evidence?
The historical evidence of the New Testament Gospels, of the writings of Josephus, Tacitus, Suetonius, the Jewish Mishnah, clearly points to Jesus. No, sir. The Jewish Mishnah was not part of the Bible.
No, I'm not talking
Josephus
about the Bible.
was not part of the Bible.
There's
Tacitus and Suetonius were not part of the Bible.
There's many readings about the other mythologies, other mythological figures, not just, if you know, like, mythology is a bunch of books about mythological people, not just one book.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So the Bible, I mean, there's other recordings about mythological people from the Bible in other readings.
What are you referring to?
Hot dog, come support the Philippines.
You say a lot of mythologies talk about an historical person? Sir, that's not mythology. Mythology is not claiming that this is historical.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying, it's that you can't take into account, like, you say that mythological characters are mythological, but you're saying that Jesus is not mythological just because you believe that.
No!
That's a belief.
That is not what I said, sir.
Yes, you did.
You're not listening.
Just because you based yourself on the Bible.
Let me say it again. I'll say it again for you one more time. You and I, as thinking people, must learn to distinguish between the literary style, mythology, epic poem, poetry, scientific literature, and historical narrative.
Yeah.
You have a history department here at this fine university. You're paying a lot of money to study history.
Yeah.
Why? Because history is a legitimate form of knowledge.
And I've read the Bible, and it looks nothing like historical writings that I've read. It looks more like the Iliad or the Odyssey. I am sorry, sir. That's how it is.
That's intellectually dishonest. The Iliad and the
No,
Odyssey
it's not.
are epic poems.
Have you read the Iliad and the Odyssey?
I sure have.
Have you read
And
the
I've
Divine
studied the
Comedy?
Iliad and the Odyssey.
It
and
looks
the
a
literary
lot like the
style
Bible.
is epic poem. And if you don't believe me, just go to your literature professor
I think
and
you have
ask
a
him,
belief bias
what's the
here."
literary style of the Iliad and the Odyssey of Homer? It's obviously epic poem.
Well, it's not.
The
obvious
Gospels
to me.
are not epic poem. The Gospels are, at this time, in this place, with these
Also
individuals
epic
around.
poems.
Archaeology supports the place names listed in the Gospels. Archaeology supports Pontius Pilate, Herod Agrippa,
They
the
also
leaders
support
listed.
Troy. They also support Menelaus. They also support all of those, and they were in the Iliad. You can't just say that history supports Jesus and not say that history doesn't support the Iliad. Exactly. So I just want to.
You bet. Have a great day.
Cliffe, however, maintains a strict distinction between historical narrative and mythology, positioning the Gospels as reliable historical documents based on their style, eyewitness accounts, and archaeological support. His insistence that the Bible is different from mythological texts rests on the claim that the Gospels present verifiable events in time and space rather than mythical allegorical tales. And the crux of Cliffe's argument, he urges the student to learn how to distinguish between different literary forms, poetry, mythology, historical narrative, which to Cliffe is critical for understanding how the Bible differs from mythological stories. By pointing to the historical figures mentioned in the Bible, such as Pontius Pilate and Herod, Cliffe, the Gospels align with historical facts in a way that mythical accounts do not.
Hey, I'm just curious, do you think a good atheist goes to hell? Like a moral atheist goes to hell?
The conversation begins with the question of whether a moral atheist would go to hell, and the initial response articulating that God respects human free will and would not force anyone into heaven resonates with foundational Christian doctrine. This aligns with the biblical teaching that humanity is endowed with free will, as seen in Genesis chapter 2, verses 16 to 17, where Adam and Eve are given the freedom to obey or disobey God's command. The notion of hell as a consequence of rejecting God, rather than a punitive measure imposed against one's will, is in harmony with Christ's teachings in the Gospels, particularly in Matthew chapter 25, verse 46, where eternal separation from God is described as the natural result of living apart from Him in life.
Any question? Does a moral atheist go to hell? Well, if an atheist is a person who says there is no God, then obviously, because God respects their free will to not believe He exists, He's not going to force an atheist to spend eternity with Him in heaven. In other words, hell is a statement that God respects the dignity of a person's choice. So if a person says, I'm going to live my life as if there is no God, God's not going to force him against his will to spend eternity with Him in heaven. Does that make any sense?
But will He damn him to hell?
Well, what is hell? Hell is simply the result of a human choice. If I choose to live my life together with God, I'll spend eternity with God. If I choose to spend my life separate from God, I'll spend eternity separate from God, is what Jesus taught.
Okay. Sweet. That's it. Yeah.
Are you an atheist? Or?
Yeah.
Okay, why are you an atheist?
I don't know. I just can't get the concept of a supreme being across in my head. It doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, in terms of the question, what are you living for, or who are you living for, and what's the evidence that whatever it is you're living for is reliable? How do you think that went through?
I mean, I just live for myself. I know that might be selfish, but I just don't get how a God could exist, but that's...
Well, what's wrong with being selfish? I mean, you acted like that was there was disparaging selfishness. You know, you say you live for yourself, and I know that that might sound selfish. Well, what's wrong with being selfish?
I guess not really. I mean, I don't think much, but I was just wondering if you thought atheists go to hell.
Right. Now, if I come up to this guy because I like his glasses, I'm selfish and I steal his glasses for myself. Do you have a problem with that, or is that cool?
Yeah, but that's kind of different.
Okay, well, how do you make an ethical decision? If there is no God, and if morality is relative, what's the basis of your ethical decisions? How do you live your life?
How my decisions affect other people.
Okay. And if you determine that your decision affects someone in an adverse way, you stay away from it?
Yeah.
Good. In fact, don't you hold to that so tightly that you really look into the face of a child abuser and say, that's really evil?
Yeah, totally.
Good. Okay, so when you look into the face of a child abuser and say, that's really evil, doesn't that tie you into justice as being a real value?
Yes.
Exactly.
I just don't see, like, I do that without a God. I don't need a God.
How can you do that without a God? How can you look into the face of the child abuser and say, that is really evil? When you know down deep that evil doesn't exist, morality is relative, because there is no God, it's all relative.
Wait, what's the question? I'm confused.
All right. If there is no God, morality is relative. Do we follow that logically? If there is no God, I write the rules, you write the rules, the child abuser writes the rules. It's all relative. Nobody's right, nobody's wrong. So just chill out. Now, if you're looking into the face of a child abuser, as an atheist, don't you just chill out? Or do you say, that's really evil when you abuse that child?
Yeah.
Which one do you do?
The second one.
The second one. Okay, you see, when you look into the face of a child abuser and say, that is really evil, you're no longer being consistent with your moral relativism.
Yes, I am.
Okay, how? How are you being consistent?
I mean, I just have my own personal beliefs. He might have different beliefs, but
Good. So if your personal beliefs say that child abuse is wrong, but his personal beliefs say child abuse is right, where do you get off telling him that he's wrong? Shouldn't you instead say, from my perspective you're wrong, but from your perspective you're right? It's all relative.
I don't know how to respond to that.
Oh, I think you do know how to respond to that. I think you know that you have a problem in your worldview, don't you?
I still don't think I have a problem in my world.
Sure you do. If you tell me, Cliff, it's all relative, and I go up to this guy, smack him in the face, remember what you're saying. Cliff, from my perspective, to smack him is wrong. That's what you would say. But I'm saying, I'm sorry, guys with blue sweatshirts on deserve to be smacked. I'm not right, I'm not wrong. You're not right, you're not wrong. It's all relative.
So you just attribute, I see what you're saying, it just doesn't make sense to me.
What do you mean it doesn't make sense?
I mean, I just don't get that to have a moral, like a solid moral, like compass, you need someone, like, or something, like a God to, like, dictate what that is. It's just,
Okay, who defines solid moral compass?
to you it's God, to me it's me.
Okay, now if in reality there is no God, then moral compass is defined by you, him, the child abuser, the KKK, the Nazi, me, and it's all relative, right?
I mean, I guess your argument's right, yeah.
But you see, you can't live that out, can you?
I've been doing it, and it's working out.
No, it's only working out because I don't think you're taking it seriously, right?
I don't think that moral relativism and being an atheist is necessarily hand in hand. I think you're relating these two things together, but it's not necessarily like a true, why are these things connected in that way?
All right, very good question. Inanimate matter has no ability to make a moral distinction between right and wrong, does it? The stone has no ability. It takes a thinking mind to say, that is right, that is wrong. If there is no mind prior to the human mind, if there is no God, then obviously it's the human mind that creates right and wrong, which means right and wrong are defined by the human mind, which means my mind is not better than your mind, our minds are not better than Nazi minds, our minds are not better than child abusers' minds. The mind defines what's right and what's wrong. So depending upon which mind you're talking to, you'll come up with it. You'll hear a different definition of right and wrong. I'm not right. You're not wrong. You're not right. I'm not wrong. It's all relative.